Hey guys, if you watched my last Star Wars video about episode 9, you heard me say that I didn't think I was going to do any more Star Wars videos. And I did mean that when I said that in that video. And I really didn't think I was going to do any more videos about Star Wars. I know it's only been like maybe a week or so after I did that last video, but I really didn't think I was going to do any more. I was extremely furious after I saw episode 9. I tore up my Star Wars ticket. That's how mad I was. So I didn't think that I was going to be doing any more Star Wars videos. And I decided to do this video because my mom told me about the season finale of Mandalorian. She begged me. She called me and she was like, "You have to watch the ending of Mandalorian." And my family, we're a huge Star Wars family. When my brother was little, my dad took him to Star Wars Celebration. We went to, back then it was called MGM, now it's Disney Hollywood Studios, but we used to go to Star Wars weekends. Not too long ago, my brother and I, we went to Star Wars Galactic Nights. So we're huge Star Wars fans. We're a huge Star Wars fan family. And my mom called me and she was like, "You have to watch the ending. You have to watch the ending of Mandalorian. It will restore your hope." Because like I was really down, like really, really, really down. And I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And so I watched the season finale, and this is Star Wars. What I watched for the season finale of The Mandalorian, that is Star Wars. Episode 9, I don't know what that shit was, but this was what real Star Wars was. There was humor, especially with the part when I call him Apollo Creed. I know that's not the actor's name, but when Apollo Creed says to Baby Yoda, "How'd the baby do the magic hand trick thing?" And the part when Baby Yoda, his ears are blowing in the wind when he hops on the speeder with the droid, and the droid says, "I'm sorry that you had to see that." And Baby Yoda is like just on the speeder and he's like, "Wee!" I was laughing so hard at that part, and I was laughing at so hard when he says, "How'd the baby do the magic hand thing?" when he waves to him, when he waves to Baby Yoda, and Baby Yoda just waves back. Just waves back at him. So this episode, the season finale, this was true Star Wars. There was humor. There was sad moments with the droid sacrificing himself. There was badass action, especially with the fight with the Mandalorian chick when she kills all of them. The fight when they kill the stormtroopers. When the Mandalorian fights. There was humor. There was action. The pacing felt like Star Wars. I felt like it was filmed even better than the movie, than episode 9. Like, the filming was better. It had the complete Star Wars feel. I felt like the chemistry of all of the characters was great. The aesthetic, the look. To me, it looked like Return of the Jedi, especially in the beginning. And it had like the sad moments, but it still had the Star Wars moments where it was fun, where it was the lightheartedness, especially when Apollo Creed says, "Bounty hunters are my favorite kind of people." Like, that's Star Wars. Like, that's Star Wars with bounty hunters and that fun element, and with the cuteness of Baby Yoda and the fun that Baby Yoda brings. I really liked that the rebel chick stayed on the planet. I really liked that. I really liked how Apollo Creed became a good guy, and he's just a bounty hunter. Like, that's how they are. That's how their personalities are. I really liked that the Mandalorian left with him at the end of the season, which is, I figured what they were going to do. I didn't think it was going to end on a cliffhanger. And I really liked the part where she gave him his signet, and his signet was of 2. And that's basically a master and an apprentice. That's a Jedi and a Padawan. And when the Mandalorian chick said to Mando, said that he needed to find the child's race or bring him, I think she called them sorcerers or magicians or whatever, or bring him to a group of that. So basically, a group of Force-sensitive people. So I believe this is heading, all of the storylines that Dave has done have stayed on the same path. They've stayed on the same path. So I believe that he's going to find Ahsoka, that he's going to find Force-sensitive people. Everything in this episode, this 40-something minute episode, was more cohesive than the new movie and the new trilogy. It had kept everything from Clone Wars and Rebels, and it kept about when the Mandalorian woman was talking to Mando about how the Force users were once their enemy. That's a reference to Knights of the Old Republic and the Mandalorian and Jedi War, which has been mentioned in Clone Wars, been mentioned in Rebels, and Dave Filoni talked about how he loved that story arc, and he has kept that. So everything was kept the same. Everything has in this episode has matched with the books. It's matched with the games. Everything with this show, with this season, has matched with the TV shows, of all the expanded universe storylines, of Clone Wars, with everything. It's also basically a live action sequel to Clone Wars and Rebels. I really enjoyed the scene where he took off his helmet because I didn't think we were going to see him without his helmet, or at least till season 2. I knew what the actor looked like because I had seen pictures of him online, but when I saw him without his helmet, to me, I thought he kind of looked like Norman Reedus. Like, I kind of thought he looked like Daryl from Walking Dead, and I was like, Daryl's the Mandalorian. But I thought that was a really cool scene because the droid's like, I'm not a living being. So I thought that was cool that we got to see his face because I didn't think we were going to see his face. And like I mentioned, things were kept the same. I'm pretty sure the Mandalorians that saved him in the beginning were Death Watch because they had the same colors. And my brother had told me, because I kind of forgot about this, that there was a civil war within the Death Watch. So it could have been a splintered faction of the Death Watch. And it was very incredible to see the Dark Saber on screen. To see the Dark Saber live action was amazing. And when I saw him with the Dark Saber, the bad guy, I was like, what happened with Bo-Katan? Because Bo-Katan was the last person who had the Dark Saber. In the ending of Rebels, Sabine gives it to Bo-Katan. So I was like, what happened to Bo-Katan? Where is Bo-Katan? Why does he have the Dark Saber? How did he get the Dark Saber? And that actor is such a good actor. He plays such a good bad guy, and he was so perfect to play the bad guy for the ending of Mandalorian. And I knew he wasn't going to die because he's so good at playing a bad guy that he'd be back in season 2. But it was really cool to see the Dark Saber like poking out, like when you can see the light, and I'm like, there's the Dark Saber. So overall, it was an incredible episode. It was incredible. It was an incredible season finale. The action was amazing. The humor, the pacing, the filmography, the storytelling, the style, the heartfelt moments. I liked the friendship with the rebel chick. I think her name's Kara. I liked the friendship with her and the Mandalorian. I liked how Baby Yoda, I loved how he crawled to him. Like, he walked towards him and held his leg. I loved how he had the Mandalorian necklace, and he's a Mandalorian Yoda, and my brother was calling him Moda. So when we were watching this, my brother and I both said, and we both felt like that this was the true sequel to Star Wars. This was the true sequel to Star Wars, and it's 5 years after the Empire falling, and we felt like this was the real episode 9. And when I was watching this, I said to my brother, I feel like I watched two completely different things. I said, with Mandalorian, I feel like I watched Star Wars. Like, I felt like it was Star Wars. The tone, the feel, everything was Star Wars. And then episode 9, like I said, I don't know what that shit was. I don't know what I watched with that. So I also wanted to make this video because I wanted to talk about the latest news regarding the future of the Star Wars franchise. And this ties in with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, so I thought that this would fit to talk about this in this video. So the CEO of Disney gave an official apology because of episode 9, because of how terrible it was, and said that they were now going to be giving the franchise, the future of the franchise, to Jon Favreau, and that they were going to wait a couple years. And from what I got out of this was they were going to wait a couple years for another Star Wars movie. So here are my thoughts on this. One, not only were fans completely outraged and furious with episode 9 because of all the plot holes, taking away the Skywalker Arc, not answering any questions, the whole plot, the whole thing of Palpatine not making any sense. Also, and the whole thing with Kylo, also, not just fans, critics. Forbes magazine, which is a famous magazine that has been around a long time, said that it was the worst Star Wars movie ever. And so did other famous magazines, other famous critics, Variety, GQ. I think Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 58%. And it was in the 50s. And The Mandalorian, I think, either got a 91% or a 94%. On Rotten Tomatoes, it was in the 90s. And all these critics brought up the same points that are valid that everyone has brought up. They talked about how the Palpatine storyline didn't make sense. They're like, so he just announces he's alive via radio? Like, he just decides, he figured out how to use a radio, how to use a podcast. I can't remember if it was Variety or if it was Forbes, but one of them said the same thing I said, was, why weren't there Force ghosts? Like, you have all these dead characters and you have no Force ghosts. Critics brought up the points of how it was rushed. You didn't even really know what was going on because it was so rushed. And they brought up how Kylo and Rey had been the center focus of the trilogy, and then they take that away when they've been the build-up, and someone was like, we have Reylo for 2 seconds, and critics talked about how it threw away the Skywalkers and the Skywalker Arc, and they talked about how with Kylo and Rey, and I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember because I read different ones, if it was Variety or if it was GQ or if it was Forbes. But one of them said that Star Wars was originally meant for children. It was meant to have a happy ending. And J.J. Abrams, with his whole, it's like a fairy tale thing, you're prince and princess. Well, I mean, what the hell were you saying that for? Because a prince and princess ride off together in the sunset. But anyways, so they brought up this point of how it was originally made for children and it was originally to have a happy ending. And the critics were saying that it was like they just were making it for adults. And I completely agree with that. In the original, Han and Leia were together and Vader died, but Vader was old and he was their father. And that was like way before there was ever a feeling that there was going to be a huge franchise. Like Vader was old, but so all of these critics said that it was the worst Star Wars movie. A critic said that Solo was a better Star Wars film than Episode 9. There was a critic that said that The Mandalorian was able to keep the feel of Star Wars but yet have a new take with Star Wars, but it still was a Star Wars story. There was a critic that said, it was talking about Jar Jar, that nobody can ever say anything bad about Jar Jar again. And I never hated Jar Jar. I thought Jar Jar was purely made for children, and I always felt bad for the actor for being ridiculed for playing Jar Jar. But I did chuckle when the article said that nobody can ever talk bad about Jar Jar after Episode 9. So I want to talk about Jon Favreau now having control of the franchise. So I was watching an episode of Chef. It's on Netflix. It's a really fun show if you've never seen it. It's basically fandom meets cooking, and Jon Favreau goes and cooks with different film people and people involved in the movie industry. And there was an episode when he went and cooked on Skywalker Ranch with Dave Filoni. And this episode came out before Episode 9. And I guess Jon Favreau had met Dave Filoni while he was working on the Iron Man movie. And Dave Filoni was working on Clone Wars. And he was like, hey, if you ever need a voice on a show, for the show, I would love to be a voice. And so he voiced Pre Vizsla, the bad guy Mandalorian, in the Clone Wars Mandalorian arc. So they have worked together, and Dave Filoni now works with him on The Mandalorian. He's directed episodes, he's written episodes. Dave Filoni is an executive producer on The Mandalorian, and Jon Favreau knows all the Mandalorian storylines because he has worked with Dave, and he played the character. Like, he knows the storylines. He played the bad guy, the Mandalorian bad guy. He knows the Mandalorian storylines. And in this episode of Chef, Jon Favreau said that Dave Filoni is George Lucas's Padawan, that he learned everything from George Lucas, that he is the second person who knows the Star Wars world, who has helped create the Star Wars world, who knows it better than anyone else besides George Lucas. And Jon Favreau talked about how George Lucas handpicked Dave Filoni and how they have written Star Wars storylines, George Lucas and Dave Filoni together. And the storylines of The Mandalorian, those were the same storylines that Dave Filoni has done. So Jon Favreau has rolled with the same storylines that Dave Filoni has been doing. So what I'm hoping for now, since Jon Favreau now has control, what I'm hoping for is that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni will bring balance, will bring peace to the Star Wars universe. I'm hoping that they'll fix this dumpster fire of Episode 9, and that they'll take time and be like, okay, how do we figure out how to fix this? And they will write another film, and they'll take time with the shows, building things up, and have Baby Yoda grown up in the movie, and have Ahsoka, and have the Mandalorian. And what they easily could do, if they took time and if they took time and everything, when they're going to have to figure out how to fix this. What they could easily do is they could have a movie with Rey finding other Force-sensitive people. They'll have to explain where the Force-sensitive people have been, why they weren't in that dumpster fire of Episode 9. And then they can explain through that way of the new Jedi Order being built, because that's what Dave Filoni that's what he has been doing for the longest time, has been gravitating towards that. And they could bring back Kylo. I'm hoping that's what they'll do, even if Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are just in one movie, or it's just a small part, that they'll bring him back and they'll be together. I have seen so many fan threads of how Kylo is alive and how he can be alive. I have seen so many, and they make perfect sense. I have seen one saying that he's not dead, that he could be alive because we didn't see him as a Force ghost. I've seen people say, oh, they could use the Mortis arc. I've seen people say he's in the world between worlds, which Dave Filoni did make that. He did make that story arc, and that wasn't the ending of Rebels, and Ezra is walking through this place where there's no time and space, and he hears voices of characters from the prequels and from Rebels and from everything, and he hears Kylo and Rey's voices. So I believe Dave was always going to connect Kylo and Rey. And so there have been so many fans saying they could use Ezra. They could use Ezra with the world between worlds and bring Kylo back that way. And all of these ways make perfect sense. All these theories. I've heard people say that Leia gave him her life force, so he's not dead, and he got transported to the world between worlds, or he got transported somewhere. And these people have brought up, I've seen a bunch of fan posts of people saying that there's some tale, I can't remember the name because there's so many, and there's so many Greek myths and tales that are like this, but that some lover gets trapped in the underworld, and then the other lover has to go into the underworld to get that lover back. So I don't care as long as the Kylo and Rey thing gets fixed. As long as they're together, that's what I care about. And they were saying that probably the movie, they said, I think maybe about 5 years. Well, Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver aren't going to look that much older. I mean, they're both young, so I that wouldn't be a big deal. And Robert Downey Jr. has been Iron Man since 2008, and he still looks the same. So that's really not a big deal for them to come back with age, with time. So that's what I care about. I care about Kylo and Rey being fixed. I'll be happy if they fix that, even if it's in just one movie. I'll be happy. That's what I want fixed. And I don't care about the other characters. There's nothing against the actors. It's just all over the place. Poe was he was the son of rebellion parents, but then he was a drug runner, he was a spice runner, and the latest one, it just was all over the place. And Finn, it's not the actor's fault. He just ended up not being anything and I just hope all he said was, Rey, where's Rey? Where's Rey? Rey! It was he's that guy that doesn't leave you alone when you say that you're not interested. And that's not the actor's fault. That's J.J. Abrams did that. That's not against the actor personally. But so, yeah, that's what I care about. I care about Kylo and Rey being fixed. And a lot of critics said this, and fans felt like it was so wrong of J.J. Abrams to cut out Kelly Marie Tran's part, like to cut out Rose. Like, she was like not in the movie, like at all, and she was a main character in The Last Jedi, and then they cut her out basically in episode 9. A lot of people felt like that was unfair to do to her. I felt that way as well. So I'm hoping that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni will fix this, and I have a little bit more hope, but the franchise can be saved after watching The Mandalorian. And I did chuckle. I saw the thumbnail of Dave Filoni at the premiere of episode 9, and I did chuckle that the question that the interviewer was asking was about Baby Yoda. Like, nobody was asking about the movie. But and there really wasn't really a lot of talk about episode 9. Like, it wasn't like with Avengers, the cast was like, I remember Chris Evans said, well, Marvel saves the best for last, and the best is in this one and the last one. And I remember the cast saying, oh, we've been appreciative of the fans and this journey with the fans. And there was nothing like that. There was no interviews like that for episode 9 of Star Wars. And, and I got worried because it wasn't done by the same people. Like, I knew Avengers was going to be good because it had Endgame was going to end good because it was done by the Russo brothers. And all the stuff with Dave Filoni has been good. And everything that he has done. And what Jon Favreau has done with him has been good. And that's one of the reasons why I was so furious with episode 9, because I felt like not only did J.J. Abrams throw away what George Lucas wrote, he threw away what Dave Filoni had written for years, and he had been working on Star Wars for years, much longer than him, and knows the lore, actually knows Star Wars. And not only like throw away what Dave Filoni had written, but his staff, the writers on Clone Wars and the writers on Rebels and the writers for the books that consulted with Dave Filoni. Like, for instance, the author of Ahsoka, she consulted with Dave Filoni when she wrote the book, and all these authors who have tried to fill in the gaps, to make things make sense. And I felt like he was just completely disrespectful to all of them. And like I said in my one video, it would not have been hard for him to consult with Dave Filoni or get his assistant or get somebody or get people to consult with Dave Filoni and to get the information. That would not have been hard at all to keep the continuity. And major critics who haven't seen the Clone Wars show or haven't seen Rebels, they talked about how there was no continuity from just seeing the movies. So even if you had just watched the films, and I remember the film critics said that the newest trilogy was the most inconsistent. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Please like it. Please give it a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And please subscribe. And Baby Yoda and Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and Mando are our last hope. Help us, Baby Yoda. You're our only hope.